think we will be live shortly. Let's find out. Let's wait for this YouTube page to update. It says we're live, so I'm just going to start. Okay. Well, this is the second discussion for the weekly rotation. The first week we went over. Let's take a look at what we looked at last week. So last week was Tall Tales. We had a pretty good discussion about that. Generally, the most loved of the three was Me Without You. So hopefully people looked into some more music from that band. I was really surprised by the reaction to Right Away Greg Hapton, because that was one of my favorites of the three. So there was a lot of, I wouldn't say hate towards it, but people didn't generally like it. So this week was indie artist albums. So this was from Tim Finucane, and personally, out of these three, I'd only ever listened to Halloween Alaska. The other two I'd never heard of before. So in general, I'd say my favorite of the three was probably Halloween Alaska. So we'll start there with what I liked the most about it and what I particularly didn't like. So what I liked the most about it, let's take a look at the playlist here. Doop, doop, doop. So let's go to number 2. So for Halloween Alaska, Too Tall to Hide was the album name. So personally, this genre is right up my alley. This kind of indie-tronic, not quite emo sounding music. I'd say if there's one thing I didn't particularly like about it, it's the thing that put me off about all three albums. Really, was they're kind of inconsistent. On this album in particular, it's right around the time Death Cab is releasing their early stuff, and there's a very similar sound. I wouldn't say they're identical, but they're pretty darn close. And in particular with this album, there are a few songs that really sound like the indie-tronic sound, and then there are a few others that go all over the place. So I have some notes here. Let's see which one I can't recall which one I specifically mentioned, but a couple of them sound a ton like Jonathan Coulton, who is a kind of folk rock parody artist who does things like he has an acoustic cover of Baby Got Back, which listening to that track side by side with I Can't Live Without My Radio, which if I recall correctly is a LL Cool J cover. They're almost the same band doing them both, which is really surprising to me, considering I think that the Joko song came out in 2009, 2010, around there. I'm not entirely sure. But then there's other tracks that kind of have a more rock sound. So there's really no consistency throughout the album about what genre it's supposed to be in. But in general, I really dug the sound of this album. It reminded me a lot of Copeland, which is kind of a emo indie-tronic band that is really, I believe they just released a new album, and they also have a few great synth covers. But yeah, so Copeland and Velasca and Death Cab, obviously I already mentioned. But yeah, a ton of that feel. Bon Iver, some of their earlier stuff, which is right up my alley. So let's take a look at the next album. So the next one was. So let's go with the Winter Circle, the Huge and Hopeful. Personally, this did not sit well with me. This sound, kind of, I don't want to. It's a horrible name for it, but radio rock is not really my favorite genre. Let's say it's not memorable at all to me. It's not catchy. There's nothing I can hang my hat on as far as a favorite song or a worst favorite song or least favorite song rather. It's just none of them really appealed to me that much. I listened to the whole album 2 or 3 times, and I couldn't remember at all what song I was listening to if it happened to have come on again on random. So not really my taste. I don't remember if I looked into their other stuff, just because I liked the uh, the Huge and Hopeful so little that I didn't really bother looking into the other ones. Um, I can't really nail down exactly what I didn't like about it. There was let me take a listen here really quickly. Yeah, it's kind of whiny radio guitar rock. I don't know how else to put it. Like I imagine Sum 41 tried to emulate this album when they're making their music. It's really just not my jam, I guess. Um, Not really that interesting musically. There wasn't much going on. Surprisingly enough, this was the most consistent. They were consistently bad, in my opinion. Each song um, kind of stayed in its own subgenre of music, and but again, not really something that I would listen to unless I was out of all other music in the world. Um, maybe not that bad. There's a lot of country I don't particularly like, but this one is on the bottom of my list of albums that I've listened to so far. Um, so what's next? The next one is, let's take a look here. Next one was the Black Math Experiment. So this one was probably the most all over the place album that in the rotation. Probably I don't know if anthology is just part of the title or it's actually an anthology of tracks. If so, then I can excuse how all over the place it is in general when it's talking about or in the sound of the album. So the start of the album for the Black Math Experiment. So let's go to the track list here. Let's go to number 2. So the this album starts off with one of the catchiest songs I've heard in years, um, with just an amazing chorus. Um, and let's listen to it really quickly. Yeah, so if you, it reminds me a lot of there is a YouTube video wherein Jean Darnielle, who is the singer of the Mountain Goats, who we listened to last week, is opening a concert for Decibel Magazine's 100th issue show, and he has this monologue where he's reading a parodied version of um, the Apocalypse, wherein the editor for Decibel plays the Beast, and that sounded very similar to "You Cannot Kill David Arquette" because that's almost it had um, the same meter almost in "You Cannot Kill David Arquette." It's an amazing song, and they're going on explaining how mythical David Arquette is, and if they he was in all three Scream movies, and if they made a fourth, he'd come back as a cyborg. I mean, amazing lyric. I really love that. So the rest of the definitely weren't as catchy and as memorable, just because it's almost impossible to be that that catchy on every track. You'd probably get exhausted if every track was that interesting. Um, I'd say the other one that really caught my eye was Science Fiction Double Feature. So occasionally on a track, they'll sound like a college garage rock band, um, which you kind of get with "You Cannot Kill David Arquette," and kind of on Science Fiction Double Feature. And that's probably where I like them the most is when they have that sound. There's other tracks that, like I mentioned before, kind of go all over the place. There's some that kind of sound like shoegaze tracks, and some that just go straight out rock, which I'm not really a fan of, as we saw with Winter Circle. It's not really my bag. But Science Fiction Double Feature is another one that really the lyrics are catchy and they're interesting, and you can kind of follow along with them. But a lot of the other ones, Step, for example, was just kind of ran together and was kind of forgetful for me, which I didn't particularly like. Um, but maybe it just might be that You Cannot Kill David Arquette was such a good track and was so catchy and was so memorable that the other tracks might be good and they just pale in comparison to how good that was. One of the other tracks that I didn't really care for was Ology. It's kind of droning on, didn't really go anywhere. And that's followed up immediately by College, which is just an 11-minute exposition on, hey, do you want to waste your money? Go to college, which was quite funny. I mean, this whole anthology kind of has that college garage rock, stick it to the man kind of feel to it, which I that's kind of something I enjoy. Not all the time. But every once in a while, you flip on the college radio and you hear a kid yelling about his college loans. That's interesting sometimes. Um, I think the other one was Steps was another track I kind of enjoyed. I don't particularly remember why. Um, Strangely enough, there's Step, which I definitely didn't enjoy, and I think Steps I did enjoy. Yeah, it's kind of a dark, droning, minor key track, and I kind of enjoyed that. Again, really could not be further from You Cannot Kill David Arquette, in that it's not at all catchy. It's just kind of this nice droning guitar rock track that really sits well with me. Um, so I quite enjoyed that. But again, I imagine that this album is actually an anthology and not just an album with the title anthology. So their uh, discongruity can be excused here. In I can't tell in this track list if it's in chronological order. I imagine not because it's so all over the place that there's no way these can these can be in chronological order and be on the same albums. Like again, You Cannot Kill David Arquette being on the same album as Step would be amazing. I don't know how that would happen. Just because it the first being really upbeat and forward and catchy, almost a pop track, and then Step being his kind of uh, droning rock song with a female lead, which there's quite a few tracks on here with a female lead, and I enjoyed them very much, but Step just didn't sit well with me. So there's that. Um, let's see what else we had. Yeah, so you can see by Purdy's comment that uh, that was definitely the the track that people enjoyed the most. I got a couple of comments on chat about how catchy that song was. I sent it to a few people, and it's really just an amazingly catchy song. Um, I don't want to say one hit wonder because I didn't look at any of their other albums. Let's take a look here. Um, oh, they only have one other album on. Let's take a look here. Yeah, that's not bad. So, as far as who they remind me of, kind of that, again, that the college garage rock sound. So, Lemuria is up there. Kind of, if you push into the shoegaze territory, um, kind of. Um, Let me remember the name of the artist here. Um, I wouldn't call them shoegaze, but it's definitely that garage rock sound. Like I mentioned, Lemuria is one. Cheap Girls is another one. Though they're kind of more of a pop punk, but they can Black Math Experiment can kind of get there occasionally. Really, man, where is this band here? Front Bottoms. That's definitely one that's kind of a similar sound. That kind of garage rock, pop punk type thing. And on the end of shoegazy stuff, now I'm not going to be able to find it because I'm recording it. Um, do do do. Fill time as I'm looking through the list here. Slingshot Dakota. That's what I was thinking of. Um, a very similar sound with the female lead in Slingshot Dakota having a very similar sound to when the Black Math Experiment has the female lead singing, which is that's probably the closest I can think of. Um, Slingshot Dakota's album Their Dreams Are Dead, but ours is The Golden Ghost, is not on Spotify, but I highly, highly recommend that you search that one out if you liked Black Math Experiments tracks that were kind of garage rock with a female lead. Um, I don't know how many other albums Slingshot Dakota produced. It might just be these two, but Their Dreams Are Dead is a great album. I wasn't a huge fan of Dark Hearts, but it's worth a listen as well. So that's about it for this week. There wasn't a ton going on, in my opinion, in the albums. I'm probably going to look more into the into Halloween Alaska, just because that was the one that sat with me the most, and criminally underlistened according to Spotify, and according to Last.fm. But yeah, a lot of Death Cab feel to it, a lot of Bon Iver, Alaska. Let's see what else here. We got a ton of stuff that reminds me of, just because it's that indie-tronica, not quite emo stuff. So let's take a look here. Not quite Bright Eyes. They're much more emo type thing. Blind Pilot, maybe. Not Dr. Dog, though there are some tracks on that Halloween Alaska album that almost get that indie rock, emo, Dr. Dog type sound that I really enjoy. Iron and Wine, early Iron and Wine stuff, definitely. Later Iron and Wine, it gets really kind of jazzy almost in their music, which I don't mind, but it's a different sound to what Halloween Alaska has. And let's see, Paper Rival, maybe. And just got pretty much this entire list. Dog and Panther, a little bit. Dog and Panther might be the closest that I can think of. They're very much a kind of early Death Cab, indie-tronic type sound to them. So Cowboy Indian Bear might be another one that is close to Halloween Alaska if you're looking to get into more bands with that sound. So many, just because that's a very broad genre that Halloween Alaska belongs to, with a lot of bands that, not to put a downer on the genre, but sound the same. I mean, you can take an early Death Cab song and find 100 bands that sound identical, given that I've listed off 20 just now. So that's about it. So let's take a look at next week's rotation to see what's on the plate there. Next week is, or I guess this coming week, for the discussion that will be next Thursday, is 80s Nuevo. So Michael Litterman made this track list, and I personally listened to two of these, Tesla Boy and Chad Valley, and I've been on a huge synthwave kick. So this is something I'm really looking forward to, and mainly the discussion to see what other bands I should be looking into. So if you have any questions or you have any comments on the previous rotation, feel free to go here, leave a comment, or you can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/weeklyrotation. We're on Facebook. We're on Google Plus, because you have to have a Google Plus account to run a Hangout, but no one else uses Google Plus. So I will see you guys next week. Adios.